This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the iPad Mini 6, or the 2021 iPad Mini. Finally a refresh after 2 years of the old model that looks sort of like a retro iPhone 8 with the big bezels top and bottom and the Touch ID button on the front. This one's sort of more like a smaller version of the iPad Air. And it has a whole lot of improvements inside, which is kind of exciting given the fact that, well, this year for the iPhone 13 family, there haven't been such big improvements. We are going to look at it now. So yeah, it's been 2 years since Apple refreshed the iPad Mini, but that's not so bad as the previous refresh for the iPad Mini 5, which took 3.5 years. So obviously, I think Apple has realized something, and that's that some people just like smaller tablets. It used to be years ago, people bought the iPad Mini because it was the cheapest way to get into the iPad, but several years ago, Apple introduced entry-level iPads that started at $329 with an approximate 10-inch display. So that became the affordable model, and now it's for those of us who just like it small. For those of you who are old enough to remember the Nexus 7, which isn't even really that long ago, that was a cult classic 7-inch tablet. So this one here is 8.3 inches, up from 7.9 inches, mostly because, again, they got rid of the giant top and bottom bezels. There is some bezel around the edges. Some of you are going to complain it's not like really cool, edge to edge looking. I like it because it gives me a place I can grip without accidentally doing stuff I didn't mean to do. I leave it up to you as to how you feel about that. Some people say, bah humbug to that. Some people say, yeah, I get that. Anyway, it looks more modern at least, but given the fact the bezels are about the same size as, say, an iPad Air, but on a smaller screen, they might look still a little big. The Touch ID button obviously isn't on the front, but don't worry for those of you who hate Face ID, especially in these times of masks. It's been relocated to the power button on the edge. It works pretty well. Obviously, when you have a long, narrow button like that, it's a little more finicky about placement. I notice I have to push a little bit more firmly on it, and it'll say rest your finger longer, whereas the front one is flawless. Typically with Touch ID also, it learns as you go along and it gets better. So I've noticed it has improved, but not quite as super flawless. But hey, I'll take it for the smaller bezels. Also, we have square sides, no kidding. It's a new design. It's the same design language we have on the iPhones and the other iPads, so that kind of curvy thing is gone on the sides. It might make it look thicker. It is not thicker. The footprint is actually slightly smaller despite the bigger screen size, and the display aspect ratio has changed a bit as a result. It's a little bit longer, so it's 3:2 aspect ratio instead of the old 4:3 aspect ratio. Suits me fine. It's Apple Pencil 2 compatible, whereas the last Mini was Apple Pencil 1 compatible, so you will need the newer pencil if you wish to use it. There is a magnetic attachment point where it can charge the pencil, so easy enough. And if you have a couple of iPads, you can actually switch in between. It'll just auto pair whenever you magnetically clip it on. The display on this is wide gamut P3, which the previous Mini was supposed to be as well. To my eyes, this looks a little bit nicer though. It's 500 nits of brightness, which is not so different from the previous one. I see less of a typical mid-range LCD color cast on it. It's a nice enough display. You can see the resolution on screen right now. And you know, some of you might say, oh, I want OLED or mini LED and stuff. Well, this is not the iPad Mini Pro. Maybe someday there will be one, but given the fact that there is actually a price increase in this with the raising of the specs and putting the iPad Mini on par with its larger brethren, shall we say. Imagine the prices, right? So I think for something that is still accessible, but still for somebody who's enthused about a small tablet, it's $499 for the starting price now. That gets you 64 gigs of storage, which ain't that much. I really think it should start at 128 like the iPhones for that price. You can get it with 256 gigs of storage, and as ever, add $150 to do that. You can get it with 5G now as well instead of just Wi-Fi, and that's $150. So if you wanted a 256 gig 5G iPad Mini 6, then you could be looking at like $800, which for me is, okay, I won't ask for a mini LED display because that's too much money already. When it comes to the processor, we have an Apple A15 CPU, so the latest and greatest from Apple. That's nice. Minis used to have kind of an older processor, and they were a little limping along. You know, people who play games would complain. So that's good. It's clocked slightly slower than the iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max, but pretty close, and the benchmarks are fairly close, within about 7%. So that's pretty good performance. The RAM increases. We have 4 gigs of RAM now. The old Mini had 3 gigs of RAM, which by iOS standards is ample enough. The display, by the way, is 60 hertz for the refresh rate on this. Now 120 hertz Pro Motion. Again, price, I imagine this is why. So there it is. Some people say they see some jelly scrolling when holding it in portrait mode and reading text. That means when you move your finger up and down to scroll text, you see the right side not keeping up with the left side or something like that. After using a Galaxy Z Fold, which had massive jelly scroll, I haven't noticed it that much. The older iPad mini had a little bit of that, but holding it in landscape mode instead of portrait mode. It happens with LCDs. I'm not sure there's anything that software can do to address that, but it hasn't been enough to bother me. When it comes to the charger, it's in the box. Hey, that's great. You buy an iPhone, you don't get a charger anymore, and it's the 20-watt faster charger. And we've switched to the USB-C standard finally, so that leaves just the iPhone still using the Lightning connector now. So great, interchangeable cables, the interchangeable chargers. Life is easy. You can use your USB-C laptop charger with it just fine. I've been doing that, and yay that. It's a 19.3 watt-hour battery, and battery life seems to be on par with the previous iPad mini 5. So you're not going to kill this in a day unless you're, I don't know, doing what, GPS gaming or something like that. And typically for tablets, you get days. Who is it for? Well, obviously those of you who want a smaller tablet. If you want a digital notepad, it's like the size of a large notepad, isn't it? For those of you who want to game but not have your hands get sore and your shoulders and all that sort of thing on a smaller scale, it is obviously the right size to be an ebook reader for those of you who like to read on LCD screens versus e-ink screens. It's not bad for comics, but personally I would prefer, it depends on the comic you're reading, but I would prefer something still a little bit larger like the 11-inch or 10-inch iPad for that. But if you're reading manga that actually are in a print format book that are similar to this, then those will look, well, just fine. The speakers are improved too. These are stereo speakers, and compared to my iPad mini 5, which I'll confess I always use before I go to bed to fall asleep, this one was like, whoa, that is loud, that is full. So for a small tablet, that's pretty nice. Other amenities include Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5. You'll only get a GPS if you go with the cellular version on this. So for those of you who need maps on the go, keep that in mind. Get the cellular version just to get the GPS. Even imagine if you don't actually activate it, it should work, the GPS portion of it. Lastly, there are the cameras. We have 12 megapixel on the front. We have 12 megapixel on the rear. Better than average, obviously. Certainly, if you're using this instead of using your Mac or Windows PC for Zoom calls or anything else, this is higher resolution. It looks pretty darn good. So it's good for that, and it supports center stage, Apple's new keeping the focus. If you're moving around the room, keeping the focus on you, and works with FaceTime and everything else as well. So it's not bad. The 12 megapixel rear-facing camera looks like a couple of year-old model phone's camera. It's okay, it's not bad, it's nothing to write home about, but then again, tablets aren't the biggest focus. And a single lens on that. So for those of you who hate making choices, you don't have to choose between your focal points and your lenses. There is just one main lens. And now, something to keep in mind is Apple says it supports cinematic stabilization, and they just mean that smooth stabilization of video, and that is effective. That's not the new cinematic mode, the one that racks focus that they showed off for the iPhone 13 Pro models there. So there it is, the iPad Mini 6, or 2021 iPad Mini. I have to say, I like it a lot, but I've been a fan of the iPad Minis. This is just the right size thing to throw in your briefcase, in your purse, to be your bedside companion, your ebook reader. It's great for travel if you want to take it for notes. Me, I like to do art. I do Procreate, so I take this and it's my pacifier on the plane. You know, I just do art and all that sort of thing. It does all things well. It's fast. The screen is decent enough. It's not class leading, but then again, it's not bleeding pricing that Apple has on their Pro line of iPads. So I'm happy to say, pretty good. Expensive though, but it's Apple, right? I'm Lisa from MobileTechReview. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos and hit the notification bell so you know about a lot more iOS and iPad coverage coming up.